Hey everyone, welcome back to Shop Life, and welcome back to the C10 build. You know, the C10 last video, we actually took the frame and cab, we separated the two, moved the frame over, but the cab was just sitting on the lift, and I don't think I'm going to be doing anything on the cab for a little while still, until we have all the frame stuff straightened away. So I thought, let's make a custom dolly or something that will allow me to move the cab around. But then Selena was like, you know what, we have the trailer. It'll probably be a lot easier just to leave it on the trailer. So I figured out a way to unload the cab from the lift onto the trailer, and this should make it a lot easier for me in the future whenever I want to put the cab back onto the lift as well. I can just roll the trailer back in. We don't have to worry about pushing it around or nothing like that, and it's easy to maneuver around anyways. So yeah, we did that, and then we got started on the frame. All right, so this is where we're at with the whole frame being separated. We've still got the engine and transmission and all that stuff attached. We literally just dropped the frame out and scooted it over, so now I have all the space to work on it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna finish stripping out the rest of the frame. So we're gonna remove the engine, the transmission. The rear suspension, I already know what I'm doing with the rear suspension, and I've already got parts ordered for that. Those are coming in the mail right now. So what we're gonna do is just gonna remove all of that rear leaf spring setup, just take all those brackets, all that stuff off, because we're not gonna need any of that. The front suspension, I'm not entirely sure what we're doing with that yet. I do know that I want to do a rack and pinion steering setup, and I do want to, like get beefier control arms, and not sure if we're going coilovers or air ride yet. Ideally, we want to do air ride, but we'll just see when we get there. Besides that, I already have all of the engine and transmission mounting stuff ready to go. So we can go ahead and get the rear suspension in, we can go ahead and get the new engine and transmission in, so then we can get the drive shaft mocked up. Okay, but I'm getting way too far ahead of myself. First, let's just strip this frame out. Let's get this engine, this transmission out. Hey, maybe somebody might even buy it. I'm not sure how much they're worth. Probably put it up for like $1,000 for both. Somebody that wants to stay period correct, they might take it, who knows. Otherwise, we're just gonna have a pretty big paperweight just chilling in the backyard. We'll see what happens. But here's how everything looks. I mean, for what it's worth, it's not too bad. I mean, it's a little crusty, but with it being off like this, I mean, this is the first time I have this kind of access to remove anything on anything I've worked on before. So this should be pretty straightforward. We're just gonna lift, well, first we're gonna disconnect the drive shaft, disconnect the exhaust, then use the engine hoist, lift that up. So I started out by unhooking the radiator from the frame. Since I had left it on there, I just removed the core support, but the clamp that actually held that lower radiator hose onto the radiator was very seized on there. So I had to actually take apart the whole clamp. I removed that whole screw system, and then I was able to take the clamp out. But as you can see, there was quite a bit of good coolant in there, but there was quite a bit of rust as well. And that coolant did not smell good at all. But we got that all drained out. We're not too worried about any of this stuff because none of this stuff is going to be reused. So I just got everything pulled off, and that should allow us to, have that whole front section of the engine ready to pop up off of the frame now. And then as I'm removing the drive shaft started separating as well, which, I mean, that's not a big deal. Those needle bearings usually replace all of that whenever you're changing, your drive shaft or changing the U-joints or anything like that. So we got all that taken care of. I didn't really drain any of the fluids in here, so the transmission still has fluid in it, so it is going to leak out a little bit. Pulling it. With all of the accessories and stuff attaching the engine and transmission to the frame, with all that stuff removed, now I could finally lift the engine and transmission off of the frame. Some of the things that we had to do were to remove the engine mount bolts. The engine mounts are like a clamshell type of mount, so it was just bolted through. Got all that stuff off. The shift linkage, all of the clutch mechanism, and all of that stuff was removed as well. So now we can just lift up the whole engine and transmission off as one piece. One other thing that's still going to happen is, since the transmission is still filled with fluid, it's going to keep draining out of the back. So that's why I have that drain pan there, and that's why I'm, taking it slowly. I don't want to make a mess on the floor. And one reason I actually left a lot of these fluids in there was because just so that way, there's no moisture able to get in. And even if any moisture does get into any of these parts, there's still enough fluid in there to keep stuff from rusting out. And I mean, I'm not really too worried about it anyways. Hopefully somebody does buy this engine and transmission. Otherwise, it's going to sit for a long period of time. Now that we have the engine and transmission removed, we can start on the whole rear section. So we're going to be removing all the rear suspension, so the leaf springs, the axle, and this spare wheel well, which was not installed properly. It even damaged the actual tire itself. But we're not going to be reusing any of this stuff, so I'm going to be taking it completely off, all the rivets and everything. so the new rear end setup that we're going to be going with is not going to require any leaf springs because we are going to go with the independent rear. So I'm going to go and just clean up the frame. So I'm going to remove these leaf spring hangers. This one right here in the front, the back one, same with the other two. I might also go ahead and remove the bump stops that are here. I believe those are for the axle. We'll probably go and pull those off as well and just get everything ready for that new independent rear that we're going to just test fit. So before we can even test fit it, because there's brackets and stuff that's involved, we are going to have to remove this anyways. So the best method I think is just going to be to cut off the rivets because they're riveted on. So cut the rivets off. And then I'm just going to use, a hammer and a chisel. I could also use an air hammer and just push it out the rest of the way. And that should pretty much take care of it. So I already know this is going to be a pain in the butt. I mean, it's just going to be very tedious cutting this off and then just, hitting those rivets the rest of the way out. And then we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's not too bad, but I'm already expecting the worst. I'm not sure how long the camera is going to last. But you guys get the idea of what I'm doing here. This is not a DIY, it's just a tedious task and it's just cutting off those rivets and then just pushing them out. Only thing, I guess you'll lose the satisfaction of watching me struggle to pull these off. But besides that, everything else should be pretty straightforward and a no-brainer if you were to do this at home yourself. So I got the floor all cleaned up, so much metal everywhere. I think that's gonna be my life for the next couple months or however long this build takes. But I feel like we're making actually really good progress on this build so far. I mean, we've got everything pretty much to the point where we can start building at this point. So all we've been doing so far is just stripping off all the stuff that we don't need. There's still a few things like the front end that we need to take care of, but I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing with that yet. But as you guys can see, we've got some parts laid out here. So these just came in and this is all for the rear end. And I think I've got it prepped enough where we can start installing these parts to do what we have planned for the rear end. But you're just gonna have to stay tuned for the next video. So make sure you hit that bell notification. You'll get notified whenever we upload. And I'll see you guys in our next video where we unwrap all of these presents. Thank you guys for watching.